Okay, so this is a video about paint, paper mache, and paint brushes. So it's going to cover a lot, so you want to make sure to pay attention. The first thing we're going to talk about is paper mache. Paper mache is at the painting station because it's nasty and we want it by a sink. So it's over by the painting station. It is in these M&M jars. You can see that there's a nasty liquid. This one's kind of thin, so it needs some more powder. I have powder that makes it into paper mache that makes it gluey, and when it dries hard. There's these containers over by there, and there will be other containers that you can pour this stuff into and use at your table. Before you get paper mache out, you need permission, and I will come over and help you. So that's paper mache. Paint. First thing that you're going to do is see if you can use the watercolor palettes. Okay, watercolor palettes work best on paper. They don't work on anything else. They're only going to work on paper. The new watercolor palettes have these paintbrushes in them. We do not want to keep the paintbrushes in there. You can take the little plastic top off and throw that away. And this paintbrush, you can use it, or you can go put it with the rest of the paintbrushes that look like this. Okay, the reason we don't want to keep it in there is if it's wet and we keep it in there and we shut it, the paintbrush gets nasty in there and we don't want that. Okay, this is in case it needs to travel like this, but it shouldn't dry in there. It's going to dry with the rest of the paintbrushes. So if you go to use this, you're going to put it in water because watercolor palettes only work if you put water on them. So we're going to put water on this gold, and we're going to rub over top of it to get it activated. Once it's activated, you don't have to do this again. There, you can see it's starting to get on the brush, so we know it's activated. When it's activated, I'm going to lightly pet the paint. Okay, if you scoop it, you're going to mess up the paint for everybody else. You just lightly pet the paint over top. Okay, you do not need to scoop on a palette. Okay, now we're going to paint it on our paper. And you can see that watercolor is kind of see-through. Though if you put more layers, the more layers you put, the darker it's going to get. Okay? When you're done, you're going to put your brush in the water, swoosh, swoosh, scrape, scrape, dab, dab, and then it's ready to paint. Okay? So there's those ones. It's okay if these aren't dry, if you just shut them up. They will dry in there. It's okay for those to be wet and be shut in here, not the brushes. The next kind of paint we're going to talk about is liquid watercolor. It's the same as the watercolors in the palettes, except for these ones are dry and hard. These ones are liquid. It's the same stuff though. It's just how it's setting in the bottle is different. So liquid watercolor, I have all the different colors in these containers because containers have these white tops and they just pop open. You can stick your brush on the inside, get it on the end of your brush, and these actually are brighter than the ones that are in the palettes. They are way brighter. They do stain your skin, so you want to be super careful, and they will stain your clothes, but they are way brighter than the other ones. Same thing, swoosh, swoosh, scrape, scrape, dab, dab, and then you're ready to paint. So when you're done with these, you want to make sure to put the lid on so it doesn't go anywhere. You can also use these palettes. I have a couple of different ones. This is a square one, this is a round one. This type actually kind of has a lid. Some of them do, some of them don't. So if you want to save paint for later, you can put the lid on, make sure to keep it super straight, and put it in your cubby. If you would like to use liquid watercolor in the palettes, you're going to only put a few drops, and since it's liquid and that hole is really big, it will run out pretty quick. So we don't want a lot. 1, 2, 3. Okay, close the lid. Then you can use this to paint. If you only need some drops or you want to use multiple colors, you can put 6 different colors on this one. If you need more colors, this one has 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 actually, 10 little holes. Okay, I have some that have 8. I have some that have more, some that have less. Okay, so you can use the plastic ones or you can use these containers that already have paint in them. Either one is fine with me. When you're done, swish, swish, scrape, scrape, dab, dab. You want to get all the water out, then you're ready to paint. Okay? If you have things like this and you didn't use it all, you don't have to pour it back in. It's only a few drops. Just go ahead and go to the sink and clean it out so it would be ready for the next class. That's why we only want to use a few drops, because you actually don't use that much paint. Next is acrylic paint. They are in these ketchup bottles. I will have some other bottles that don't look like ketchup bottles that have acrylic paint in them, but they will say paint across the front. Make sure that when you go to squeeze these, you don't squeeze very hard. If they are stuck, ask for help and I can get them unstuck. You can see sometimes they gather paint at the top, sometimes they can gather paint right here where it's hard to use. So we don't want to keep squeezing, keep squeezing, keep squeezing, and then paint fly everywhere. So this is acrylic. We also have temper paint, which is pretty much the same thing. Acrylic is going to be more plasticky. Temper paint is going to be more like chalk paint. So this will look a little chalky. Okay, so you can use acrylic paint on a plate. You can use acrylic paint on the pallets, the plastic pallets. You can use acrylic paint in a cup. You can use acrylic paint on the lids, the ice cream lids. Okay, now we're going to talk about which one I should use and when. Okay, if you were going to just use one day and you need a couple of different colors, you can use the ice cream lid. These are good for like mixing, just using it for one day, just getting a little bit of paint. These are easy to clean and they're reusable. Okay, so once you pick one up, you clean it off, you put it back, and the next person can use it. These are perfect for reusable situations. These are like if you're gonna mix a certain color and you're gonna mix paint and you need to save that paint for the next time, these are perfect. Sometimes I let people use them if they're gonna use like a whole bunch of white. They can put all the white in here, put the lid on it, and if they don't use it all, someone else can use that pure white color. So that's what these are for. We only want to use these if we absolutely need them. These ones are really hard to clean with acrylic. They don't like to come off and you have to scrub. You can use them if you want a lot of different colors and to keep them separated, but you don't have to. I'm going to show you a different way. We have plates that look like this, or white plates. These do cost a little bit of money because everybody's going to have a plate, and then when you throw them away, it does cost more, but they are easier to clean. So if you're going to mix a bunch of paint and then you're going to use it all that day and you're going to toss it, these are perfect for that one day paint. If you're going to use it multiple times, I would suggest not to get this because it will dry out. The paper will dry out the paint. We do have sacks, so if you happen to get some paint on here and you want to save it, we have sacks that we can pull over it, zip the sacks up, and try to use it the next day. That's fine. These also have lids, so you can use the next day on these. These ones have lids. You can use the next day on these. This ice cream pail is the only ones that don't have lids, but they are good for I need paint right now, and they're easy to clean. Okay, so there's multiple ways. I would suggest you either use plates or use ice cream lids. If you know you're only going to need paint that day and only a little bit of paint, use your ice cream lid. If you're going to need a lot of paint, these are a little bit bigger than the ice cream lid, and you want to do a lot of mixing, these are great. Either one is fine with me. I just don't want to see a little bit of paint on the plate and then you didn't use the whole rest of the plate. If you're going to do that, you can use, you know, the plastic ones or these ones. They are harder to clean, but you won't be so wasteful. Or you can use these, a little bit of paint, clean it off, no big deal. Okay. You want to make sure that before you use paint, you're asking for permission and that you're showing that you are ready to use paint. Paint is the last thing that you use on most projects, so you draw it out, you make sure everything's ready, and then you paint. You don't start with paint right away. Okay, you want to make sure that the painting station stays as clean as possible, making sure that everything gets put back. With acrylic paint, let me use some acrylic paint on this. With acrylic paint, you can see that I barely squeezed and a lot came out. And that's fine. If too much comes out, you can always just open this lid up. Grab your brush, making sure it's super clean because we don't want any dirty brushes putting paint back in. You can lift up and put paint back in. Okay, sometimes when you do this, you get paint in what we call the furrow of the brush. That's the metal part of the brush. So when you do that, it makes the brush really hard to clean, but we want to make sure to get all of that out because that leaving paint in the brush, especially really high in the brush by the metal part, that's not very good on it because it can ruin the brush. So the first thing we want to do is, if we have a cup of water, is to use that water and really swoosh that in here. The cup of water can get a lot of that out, and you can see it got almost all of it out. When you go to the sink, you're going to run it underneath the sink and do one of these, making sure all of that paint gets out. Okay, if any paint shows up on your fingers, that means that your brush is still dirty and you need to clean it in the water again, either in the sink or in your cup. Okay, when you're done, you're going to what I call massage the brush. So you're going to make sure that it's all pointing up, nice and straight, not having any crazy hairs. And then it goes straight up back where you found it with the rest of the brushes. It's okay if it's wet and the rest of the brushes are dry. We want them to dry standing up. Same thing with this one. You're going to clean. Okay, even underneath the sink, clean it. Massage it, making sure it's straight up, and then putting it away with the rest of the brushes. These ones, we have little green sponges, so you're going to run it underwater, making sure the water is only a little bit dripping out, because if we put it full blast, the water is going to hit this and then come and hit us. So you only need a little bit of water and rub all the paint out, making sure it's nice and clean. Whoever had this one last did not clean it well. Okay, it should look like this one, nice and clean with nothing on it. If I see that things are more like this one, we will spend the whole day cleaning all of our supplies rather than making fun art. So we want to make sure that we clean everything nice and that it is taken care of. Okay. If you have any questions, make sure to ask, and make sure you have 10 points of evidence. You should have 10 points of evidence by now on this video, and I hope that you know what kind of art you want to make with this type of materials.